Zach whipped out his mic, which means it must be Cookie Pocket.
Yep. Time to rumble.
Episode 91.
Yeah.
Rumble Tumble. How are y'all doing today, Zach and Cristiano?
Can't complain.
Mm-hmm. Pretty darn good, huh?
So let's say you were put in a box and you had to escape.
Oh.
How great would that escape have to be?
Well, it might be a 2.5 out of 5. I mean,
Oh my.
Oh my God. Well, the box is actually a POW camp in World War II because we're doing The Great Escape.
Don't
Wasn't that a
say.
good analogy? The Great Escape is a 1963 American war suspense escape film thingy. We're back to many genres again. Directed by John Sturges, whose proudest moment in his career was when Kurosawa said he loved The Magnificent Seven.
Oh.
Produced by West Side Story, producer Mirrors Pictures, and is based on the insider account of the 1944 Stalag Luft 3 mass escape of the same name, and follows British Commonwealth POWs along with 3 Americans that were probably not there in real life.
Oh.
It stars Steve King of Cool McQueen, James All the Movies Gardner, Richard Isla Nublar Attenborough, James Scottish Donald. Wait, I said Donald, didn't I? James somebody. What's his name, Zach?
I don't know who you're talking about.
I think his name is James Donald. Donald, Carpenter alum, Pleasance, and many others because I was running out of time. What did you guys think of the film?
Well, Christian, why don't you start on this one? Because I think you have kind of the
Christian's
outlier
really
opinion
anxious.
here.
Christian's anxious.
You just had to do that to me. I didn't think you'd do that to me, Zach. I really didn't. Well, let's see. It's totally fine, and I think my 2.5 score tends to be my default score when I have to acknowledge on some level that a film is impressive for its time, or good to an audience that does not include me, but I also didn't particularly enjoy it. So I landed on a 2.5 out of 5 for this. And my biggest complaints are probably the runtime, and especially in the first half, the way that the drama is portrayed and the conflict and the power dynamics of the whole thing. I didn't feel like the Germans or the camp itself, by extension, were a very tangible threat, and as a result of that, I felt like I couldn't latch onto the conflict very much or feel any real sense of peril for the characters. Maybe that's silly because going into this, we know that it's based on a true story and it's called The Great Escape, so they're probably going to escape in a great fashion. But I still like to feel some level of suspense, or at least internally questioning their success. I really enjoyed Elmer Bernstein's score. I found myself humming and whistling it after the film was over, and I think Zach was whistling it or humming it a second before we hit the record button.
Yeah.
It's very catchy, and it does a great job of sort of stirring up drama, if in an old-fashioned way. I found that a nice touch. And the other thing, for me at least, the characters were just not very distinct, and I think this comes from a mode of performance that is confined to the time period. I just felt like, other than, I guess, Steve McQueen, most of the characters just sort of blended together in my head. I don't remember any of their names, but I guess it's not too uncommon for a film to come out not knowing a character's name. But 170 minutes is a long time, and when the first hour of that or so is a lot of talking about what you probably already know is going to happen for like the last 2 hours, it just grew very tedious for me. So 2.5. I enjoyed elements of the escape itself, like the motorcycle, like the and then he turns around and he goes the yeah, yay, motorcycle. But, I wish I liked this more, but ultimately I didn't find it super memorable. So alas.
Okay. I enjoyed this. and this is a film that I've enjoyed quite a bit since I was, a kid. I probably watched this for the first time when I was like 10, because my family had it on dual VHS, the 2 tapes in the same box. And I saw, Christian, there was a Letterboxd review that you had liked that said there's like 3 camps of people who review this film probably. There's like older people who like it from when it came out, younger people who are influenced by those older people, and people who think it's just okay. And I think on the younger people camp, I'm probably an outlier there, because when I was a kid, I remember really liking this movie, despite the length, and despite not really knowing who any of the leading stars of it really were at the time. I think in a lot of ways this is kind of a you had to be there type film, because I will agree, Christian, that I think the characters on paper aren't all that distinct from each other, but the characters aren't necessarily their characters by name as much as they are, that's James Garner, that's Donald Pleasance, in the same way that like, it's a little harder to find a comparison now that like movie stars aren't really a thing anymore, but I don't know, this is kind of almost like an Avengers Infinity War style cast, where you're coming to kind of see all these people in the same movie more than you're necessarily coming to see I really want to see the story that they play out, and I want to see how all of the characters are distinct from each other. It's more, look at all this big name talent we've got in the same space. That said, despite being impressed by it a lot when I was a kid and really enjoying it when I was a kid, this viewing, I found it to be thoroughly good, but I wasn't super impressed by the film as a whole. I'm relatively entertained by it the whole way through, and the long running time kind of whipped right by for me. But a lot of the kind of style of the filmmaking is kind of plain, where we're getting these wide shots of the camp and wide shots of the road, and every now and then there's a moment with a very inventive shot or a really neat set piece. The motorcycle chase is a highlight. I think the motorcycle chase is also an obvious influence on the motorcycle chase in The Last Crusade, which has a similar setting and similar beats, even if it's a little more over the top in places. Another shot I really love towards the beginning of the film, we see this high-angle crane shot of like the whole camp with everybody walking in, and then you crane down from that shot, and then the fence appears at the bottom of the shot until you're filming through the fence to see everybody through it. There's little inventive moments like that I think really are highlights, but they're few and far between, I think. So I was entertained by it. But I don't think it impressed me like something like, say, The Bridge on the River Kwai, which is kind of from a similar era and a similar production mindset, impresses me with its style more than this, I think. So 3 out of 5, a fun time all around, even if I don't think it's great.
I think it's funny that the two, I think that at least these are our own self-identified stereotypes. The two that come out the most between both of you is like a central conflict that I care about and am invested in, and then style.
Yes.
And those are like those are the two things that definitely, like, in my mind, occasionally fumble the bag. But I think that, well, first of all, I would address Christian's point about the fact that this is based on something that really happened, and I think the timing was just early enough where there was less, well, I guess just early and just late enough where it was there was less of an intention of trying to sugarcoat it or trying to Hollywoodify it too much, because as we've seen, this is kind of an unavoidable mention. We've had a World War II POW film before, Hearts War, yeah. Which was probably a lot more, Hollywoodified. It's like loosely based on the story, but doesn't go like through the events of it. And I think it really helps the fact that there was so much that was going on behind the scenes, and there were so many people involved, and the fact that they could get this many stars in on it to participate, and like they all had different roles and different like monikers that we sort of not really remember them by. They're like called it like 3 or 4 times throughout the whole film probably, so it's harder to remember a lot of it. Except the end credits, you're like, oh, I didn't know he was that Big X. They only call him that once, I think. So, but yeah, I think it's a really hard film it's a hard film to really not want to just accentuate a lot of like the exaggerations, and like just go all out and just show like, you know, a lot of them getting shot and stuff. Like the one Scottish guy climbing the fence and getting shot. Right. That's just like an indication that there is a possible threat of you leaving. But I think a lot of the problem too is there's an oversaturation, especially in the past probably 20 years, of POW films that were Japanese set, and just because the fatality rates in Japanese POW camps was like 30%, and in German camps it was like there's like a 5% chance. So like not even that, I don't think. So I think those are the difficulties that you have with trying to show like the events, and I the coolest parts for me are a lot of the quotable moments and the individual conversations. You feel like there's an ongoing like brewing way to escape. You never feel like the steam's being, you know, let out. I mean, you always feel like it's this conflict is still rolling in the background, even when like fun's happening, especially with the potato fermentation and everything like that, and like the goofiness, and that's why I gave it 4 stars. I think the last half of the movie is what's criticized for historical accuracy, which we'll talk about. And I think that's probably where the most royalties were taken on that front. And I think and a lot of the actual camp people that survived, or anyone that was like involved in the whole escape, agreed with that. And I think that was possibly an issue, but it's so under accentuated, and like you had mentioned, both of you really liked the motorcycle chase. I feel like that was by far, like, that was a completely just Steve McQueen idea. I have to have motorcycle scene to be in this movie type thing. So and I think it really added a good little like suspense thing, and the subplots I thought were very interesting. So yeah, I gave it 4 stars. We can talk about the Zach had mentioned the style, and I think that was something that was not nearly as big of a deal to me, because I'm kind of used to a lot of like standardized style when it comes to war suspense / adventure films, and I feel like a lot of films of this time had that same layer, and I agree. I think there's a couple times where I was surprised, especially during the conversations, besides like just having the sitcom we're sitting in the 3-wall type deal, but some of the like the follow shots with Steve McQueen and him sitting in the boxed cooler and everything, I think all those are pretty memorable. But what did you guys think of the style in terms of like other war films that you've seen, and like why was it as big a deal for you, Christian, and why was it a bigger deal for you, Zach? Like, is it just because it wasn't standing out, or like it wasn't? Because my issue, I'll supplement this question because I think for me, I feel like there has to be a purpose to have more of an accentuated style. Like, is there any reason for the film to stand out outside of the history that it's trying to tell, or like that? Because obviously that's interesting to me personally, but setting my bias aside, I feel like the film was trying to tell an account of this, and just. It wasn't trying to like over dramatize it or anything. So like, what would be your suggestion then? Like,
well, yeah. I mean, I think when I talk about the style of the film a lot of the time, and the style being sort of plain, I'm more talking about the way that that it's filmed and the way that it's put together doesn't really put me in the feeling of a scene the way that I feel it could if it was maybe shot a little differently. So I'll use like a season 2 example, which I think was more of an egregious offender in this case, but this film kind of reminded me of it in a few places. When we watched Where Eagles Dare, my big criticism of that movie was that so much of it is just flat and wide. And even when things that could be intense are happening, they're not filmed in a way where you're put in the situation and thinking like, oh shoot, pick up that grenade. You're just like, oh, he's gonna pick up the grenade. So there was that scene in the hallway in Where Eagles Dare where someone throws a grenade at Clint Eastwood, and it's sitting there for like 4 seconds, and just in the same wide shot, he leans down and picks it up and throws it back. And in a moment like that, you could really edit that and shoot that in a way that creates some tension around the idea of there's a grenade right there, and Clint Eastwood has to keep shooting at these Nazis to keep them back, but if he doesn't get the grenade, he's going to blow up any second now. And the way that it's shot just doesn't communicate that tension. I think there's a lot of portions of this film where that's also a complaint for me. I think a lot of the stuff in the tunnels doesn't really communicate the claustrophobia and the tension of being in there quite the way that I think it could. And a lot of the film, the point is just look at the procedure, look at the planning. And so for that, I think the kind of flat and wide is okay. I don't mind that as much. But especially scenes like where there's a cave-in, or scenes where like Danny is hearing creaking in like the rafters above him. And he's clearly in this situation of like, is this going to cave in on me at any second? Like, you could take some more time there, and you could get a close-up of Danny as he kind of looks up, and you could see a little bit more on Charles Bronson's face to kind of put you in the emotion of that moment. And a lot of the time, they don't do that. They just kind of shoot it from the side on this sort of cutout set that they have. And it's a narrow shot, but it doesn't bring what it could to that moment. And it's just little things like that I critique more when I'm talking about the style, I think.
Yeah, I don't have the vocabulary to address this the same way Zach does. But strangely, I can't say why, but the camera work in Where Eagles Dare did not bother me as much as here. I felt like a lot of the time, how do I describe something? I don't have a term for it. So it just felt like the camera doesn't move a lot, and when it does, it felt like it was turning to where a character was going, like the motorcycle when he goes and then it's like like follows him to down that sort of trench is not the right term, but between the barbed wire or whatever,
like
and
in
then
the
he
gully,
circles back around. Yes. But for most of the rest of it, it just felt very static to me, and I don't know if I'm overlooking something or if I was just less inclined.
Now
I don't know why, but yeah.
Where
I
did
didn't,
you watch this, Christian?
I streamed it. I think it was on Max, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's on Max.
What do you remember? What aspect ratio it was in?
Widescreen. Black bars. I'm not sure exactly what.
Okay.
But,
okay.
yeah.
Because something. I mean, if you saw it in the widescreen, then that makes sense. But a lot of copies of this movie are distributed in 16:9. And then just the opening and ending scenes are in the proper aspect ratio. So I had thought, and when they do that, they do pan and scan for scenes like, say, the motorcycle. So in post, they've just made it kind of move with it. So I do think that distracts from some of the intention as well. But it sounds like you weren't saddled with that kind of a copy, which is good.
Yeah, I guess not. So it wasn't that extreme, but I guess it was sort of unremarkable, and I was looking for something to, like you were using Where Eagles Dare as an example, something to make me feel more tension or just more investment one way or another. And it wasn't a negative as much as it was a non-factor in that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I will add on to that. I think even though it didn't bother me nearly as much, and I didn't think it was nearly as necessary, at least speaking to the situation, but I think the subplots, there's a lot of, I mean, I guess because it's focusing on the characters a lot and focusing on like the getaway for each of them and like focusing on the conversations that they're having, there's a lot of like backgrounds and stuff that were entirely real backgrounds that like weren't backlot pictures and stuff, like Bavaria and things like that, which was interesting. I think a lot of those settings were very believable, and I think, I mean, I could pretty much tell that like the camp was like not a real camp. It wasn't in a real place, but at least at nighttime, I think that, well, I don't know how they do the lighting, but I thought the lighting was good to see everybody's faces. And I like to make fun of Steve McQueen's fit, and I rate his fit 3 out of 10 for incognito operations. Because so otherwise I think the setting was very believable. I think I will mention the uniforms. I know you guys wouldn't know exactly, but there was the Waffenfarbe collars. The colors on their collars are distinctly with the Luftwaffe Air Force, right? Because it was the Air Force that managed basically all the POW camps, in case you didn't know. And because Hitler did not like Göring very much, so he's like, send some of your worthless troops to the freaking POW camps. So a lot of that, what you see will be reconnaissance ones, which are gold, and then red is the flak, like the anti-aircraft gun people. So a lot of them are like younger kids or like random goober officers that can't do anything right, so they send them to a POW camp. Which I think was an interesting contrast later, having the Gestapo show up and the SS and like showing how they operate differently. I thought that was an interesting and historically accurate touch. But for me, I don't think believability was really much of an issue, except the second act, which I guess we can talk about now in terms of historical accuracy. But well, actually, I'll mention the big thing. The biggest things were that there were Germans that actually helped them. There was a little bit of evidence of this with the camera. There were Germans that were staunchly anti-Nazi that actually helped them escape, and they were kind of a major factor in them escaping when it came to like getting supplies and covering things up. And there's a lot of paying off the guards and things like that, which was a very common thing at the time for camps and like situations like this. And I think I think you can kind of guess why they wouldn't do that. There really isn't much room in the narrative for that to happen. I mean, I suppose they could add a few more things here and there, maybe pad it, but I think a lot of the central conflict had to do with actually digging the tunnels and like protecting the tunnels' existence, and that was kind of like the main part before the actual escape. There was obviously they have to show Germans getting like knocked out and stuff. That never actually happened. And then going on to the second part, so the plane thing never happened. The motorcycle thing obviously never happened. There's a lot of question as to whether or not the good luck line was ever said. There's a lot of historians that actually accepted that to be true just because of how impactful and memorable that scene was for a lot of people. So, but there is no like way to corroborate that. So, based on what you know and what I've just told you, does that at all influence, like, is there any of that influences your opinion of like how the accurate things should have been? And I know that Christian mentioned like maybe that might be like a bigger issue for someone else, or like that might be part of the reason why it was kind of a drag, or that it wasn't as easy to invest in like the conflict because there wasn't really much of like a sense of war and terror going on. It was kind of just like guys running a camp, because that's kind of how it really was. So what did you guys think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of the second half, none of those events that I guess didn't actually happen particularly distracted me. I mean, while watching it, part of me did think, okay, did this Steve McQueen insert character really almost jump over the barbed wire fence to Switzerland? Probably not. Maybe somebody almost did at some point, but almost certainly not this exact person in relationship to the camp. But it feels like something that somebody could realistically try at that time. Same thing with the plane. Nothing feels especially far-fetched. So I'm fine with it. I mean, it's not like at some point Richard Attenborough commandeers a tank or something. It never like jumps the shark or anything like that. And in terms of the camp proper, I know, Christian, you had mentioned that the Nazis in the camp didn't really feel like a threat. That never really bothered me, even when I was younger, because it's sort of always been my impression, at least, that the relationship between the Nazis and prisoners of war was, I mean, yes, they were prisoners, but outside of that, it was all rather begrudgingly civil was kind of my impression. Of course, a movie like Hearts War shows much more desperate conditions. But my
Bruce Willis,
my dad's social studies teacher in high school actually was a prisoner in the camp that Hogan's Heroes was based off of.
Wow.
And his
That's great.
account of the situation was that, it wasn't like a Charlie Chaplin movie, but things were, not awful. It was all rather kind of as courteous as it could be in that situation. And I almost kind of think that kind of works within the confines of the movie, because it makes the kind of concluding scene toward the end where 50 of these escaped prisoners are rounded up and shot. It kind of makes it into a shock equivalent to that it is for the prisoners themselves. Because I think a lot of the first half of the movie, even though there's the sense of like, oh, we can't get caught, it is kind of like jovial. And there is this sense of like, we can't get caught because we'll just have to stay here until the war's over and we want to go home. And at the end, there's kind of the shock of like, they're talking about, oh, well, they're going to put us in another camp. We're going to have to dig another tunnel. And they're kind of, having this and then they all end up being shot. And it kind of does, I think, sort of turn things around and establish this feeling of like, all right, we had good fun, but, there was a war on and people legitimately died. And I think that kind of works for it, even if maybe that contrast wasn't exactly intended that way. I think that ending was certainly meant to be shocking, but I don't necessarily think they were trying to lull people into a sense of security with the first half, even though I think that kind of does happen. Mitchell, I don't know if you have any input on whether the portrayal during the first half of this is especially accurate to how a camp like this would actually have been run, or if there would have been public floggings or something in actuality. I don't know.
Well, the thing is a lot of this was managed by the Geneva Convention.
Oh.
So the biggest, I think it's good that Christian mentioned that it feels like there's not really much of a conflict, because there really wasn't. Like you're literally, like I said, if you're putting in the shoes of like the Germans, like they're just like the kid that's locking up Steve McQueen's freaking like 18 years old, if not younger, right? Like he's just some random dude that got conscripted and is like in the middle of like, he's in the middle of the Eastern Front, and they mentioned that as a joke, which is great. But yeah, like you get it sent to the front if you don't, if you have more escaped prisoners type of thing. But you can't kill prisoners if they escape. That's a part of the Geneva Convention that was signed by Germany. So the Japanese did not sign that. So hence the major reason why there is that issue. And obviously there's a racial element to that as well, and cultural difference. That's a huge factor. I think Unbroken, as very Hollywoodified it was, I think you get like a general idea that it was like a different place to live, right? But yeah, I'll go on to what Christian wanted to say, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I think every time we visit a war film, I feel less inclined to weigh historical accuracy as important, and I feel like the disclaimer at the beginning of this film gave, in my opinion, or should give them more than enough license to do everything that they eventually did. And I don't think the fabrication got to the point where it was just so ridiculous or unbelievable that it negatively affected it as an entertainment product. And morally or whatever, I'm pretty much unbothered by any other small changes. I think probably the most and Mitchell, you mentioned earlier that there might not have been any Americans at this camp, or and they do say, one of the specific things they say in this disclaimer is that they're composites of real men, but they're not exact correspondents of those people. I do think it's important that, again, the names are eluding me, but the one guy basically gives up and tries to just run and escape and gets shot, and that's kind of like a big turning point for Steve McQueen. And I don't know if events occurred so linearly in the real world, and I have to imagine they probably didn't, but I still think that's probably the most important like source of momentum or like a climax before the climax. So I think as long as it's in service of the story and the way you're trying to tell it, deviating from real world events doesn't really bother me, especially when you're so deliberate about saying, yeah, this isn't exactly what it was, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, and I think I will mention this because I did not know this until I researched. I was trying to figure out whether or not there were Americans there. There are some claims that there was, and there's like some anecdotal accounts, but it's generally historically agreed that there wasn't. I'm not going to say definitively which is true and which isn't. If there were Americans, there's probably very few, and there probably weren't as nearly as involved. It was intended for the British, the camp, and a lot of them were brought to the camp in 1943, so there wasn't like an influx of Americans. The camp was intended for British airmen and things like that. So I think that's kind of settled. I think one interesting fun fact, I'll say it really quick. So Johnny Dodge, who is known as the Artful Dodger, was a major in the British Army, right? And he was actually American. He was American born in New York City. But he was a part of this escape. He was one of the 3 that eventually survived, because I think there was 74 or 73 or 74 that tried to escape. 50 of them got killed. A lot of the other ones were recaptured, and like other indiscriminate things happened to them. So what happened was, I think all of them, I don't think any of them might have escaped after that first escape. 3 of them, or possibly more than 3, but very few of them were brought to a concentration camp, actually. And Johnny Dodger was one of them in real life. And they chained them to the floor. But I'm not sure how exactly he escaped, but he did escape the concentration camp. And then he actually survived until I think like the 90s, 80s, 90s. So that could be its own movie in and of itself.
Yeah.
Maybe they could cast Bruce Willis as Major. No. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's basically an impossible task, I think, to make this more suspenseful and more interesting without sacrificing historical accuracy, in my opinion. And I think I definitely agree with both of you that there wasn't anything that was like majorly sticking out to me that was historically inaccurate. There was things I knew right away that were probably not things that happened, and I just I already knew about the motorcycle chase thing and everything. But, it's like Steve McQueen isn't even a real character. He's not based on anybody, I don't think. He's kind of just like a funny American guy that's brash. American guy, brash man. You guys so impolite all the time.
Okay.
And yeah, okay. I was gonna, Zach, you can talk about
if the camp was meant for the British.
Yes.
There wasn't an Australian there, was there?
Like in real life?
Like in real life, because that stuck out to me. Like, James Coburn cannot do an Australian accent. Why did you try to make him do an Australian accent?
Yes, I think my dad mentioned that. So it's the British Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. So when I say British, I mean
okay. So people from the colonies end up there.
My mistake. Yeah. Yes. So including the Australians, the Scottish.
Okay.
Because all of them were conscripted into the war effort as well. So. Yes, and I think there was. I think that Australian might have been based off of a real one.
All right.
But a lot of these characters were based off of conglomerates of other characters, but a lot of the monikers that they had, I think all of them that were in the credits were real monikers that they used, like Big X and the tunnel expert tunneler or whatever.
Scrounger.
What's his name? Yeah. The Drayton. Yeah, Scrounger. Obviously, those were caricatures. Those are over-exaggerated. It's funny that you mentioned, like, the Avengers. It's like they all have their own purpose, and a lot of times they only have like 1 or 2 scenes where they use that purpose. What's his name? James Donald, which it is his name, the Scottish guy, the tall, lanky, who's the main like British officer who's in charge of everything while they're escaping. Mm-hmm. He's like the SBO, the senior British officer or something. Like, just, you know, I think it's just like a cute adventure thing. And I mentioned this in my review. It's basically, you have to accept that this is like an adventure film. And, like, that this is supposed to be, like, a fun, enjoyable thing. Oh, no, there's consequences. 50 of them got shot, which was directly ordered by Hitler, by the way. Because he was so frustrated that there were so many escaping. And this is in Germany, you know, so it's totally realistic. The Gestapo would have found them and killed them. All those scenes were fairly realistic, too. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Oh, and we can talk about the score. We can end on that because
Okay.
the score. There's a lot of motifs that are used for different characters. If you rewatch it, you can actually hear the different motifs for different characters. I bet. Yeah, I was gonna say Christian probably picked up on that. What do you have to say, Christian?
No, I really enjoyed it. These little themes and leitmotifs that were recycled thoughtfully throughout. And it did make me think of John Williams, who does the same thing. Like
Wow.
like the Force theme is played when Han's like it's true, all of it, or whatever. And yeah, I mean, like Yoda's theme when his Force Ghost shows up or whatever. Those are two of. There's like a billion examples of that in any film he's done, and it's effective. I mean, I think a jerk reaction to something like that might be, oh, that's cheap or lazy or something. But this is a tradition that has existed before cinema as we know it has. I mean, this comes up in opera. Characters will have themes and like a romantic era German opera, So this is a lengthy musical tradition, and I think that's for a reason, because it appeals to the base human in all of us in a good way.
That's why Super Mario Brothers movie should be 5 out of 5 because there's like over 100 musical motifs, light motifs or whatever it's called. If you've played every single Mario game, you will enjoy the game. You enjoy the movie way more.
The Mario cinematic universe, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that the score is pretty solid. I can't say I noticed it as much as Christian did, and I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of it, the most memorable bits to me, are at least the bits that are based around that central theme, that central whistled theme, which, at least for me, like everybody knows it at least a little bit. It's like the theme to Bridge on the River Kwai, which is very similarly whistled, where even if you haven't seen the film, everybody kind of knows that tune from something. Maybe it showed up in like an advertisement or something like that, but they have some
or
familiarity
TikTok.
with that. Maybe it's in a TikTok. I don't know. TikTok recently discovered 12 Angry Men. Who knows? They might discover
Wow.
The Great Escape pretty soon too. And okay. I don't. This is sidetracking a little bit. As long as it encourages these young people to go find the actual film, I don't mind young people finding and being impressed by a scene from an older film on TikTok. As long as they track down the original film. If you're watching select scenes,
no, Zach. I promise you, they're not.
I think some of them might be. There's millions and millions of people who use TikTok. They can't all be people who just never mind. Some people have to at least go, I'll put that on my Letterboxd watch list.
Yeah, maybe
right next
like
to the Barbie movie. But, okay. I enjoy the score. Also, I really like some of the bits, particularly that follow Danny and the guy that Danny escapes with. I forget that character's name. But especially as they're kind of like going down the river and they find the boat. I like some of the kind of more string orchestral-oriented bits of that. Yeah, I guess now we're segueing into final thoughts. I'll just mention shout out to William Russell, who's in this film. He doesn't play a huge character, but William Russell, the same year this came out, would be one of the very first companions on Doctor Who. He plays Ian Chesterton, who's a school teacher who's kidnapped by the Doctor in the very first episode of the show, which came out in November of '63. In this, he plays the guy who's in charge of security for the team. So he's got little lines here and there, and basically any time that the security team are like knocking on things and doing things as a signal, he's there somewhere in the mix, even if he's not one of the big name characters.
Right on. Yeah, I don't know. It was fine. It just wasn't for me. Shout out to James Coburn for voicing Waternoose in Monsters, Inc. Take that, Zach.
Oh, I totally forgot that was him. James Coburn is a great actor. I like him a lot. The man just can't do accents of any kind.
Oh, he was in The Player, too? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Cool guy. Okay, yeah.
I'll mention... Sorry, what were you going to say, Christian?
No, I was just gonna say things that we already know. I just think you probably know whether you like this film or not before you watch it.
Mhm.
And if you have the patience for a 3-hour film, you'll probably find something to enjoy.
Mm-hmm. I'll mention Hannes Messemer, who is the Oberst von Luger, the commandant.
Oh, yeah.
He actually served on the Eastern Front for the Germans, so he was an actual German officer.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool. Doesn't usually happen. But who else? David McCallum, who I didn't even recognize, was in this. He was in the TV show The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and he's also in NCIS, if anybody knows that.
Oh, the new NCIS?
Oh my god!
The show that's
what do
been
you
running
mean,
for like
Zach?
30 years. The new NCIS.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. My dad will know, and probably our parents would know. I don't know how many NCIS, but anyway, yes, I think you will know if you like this or not. It really, I don't know if I want to go as far as to say it's like the progenitor, but I think it pretty much is like the progenitor of World War II POW films. And kind of standardized like Hogan's Heroes as like the meme show, and I think this is probably definitely one of the best ones in that very small subgenre, and I think I think it's a necessary watch for like war movies of the 60s. I think it's kind of one of the, I don't know. I'm running out of idioms. Zach can spit them out in like 2 seconds. I can't do that. Yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I think it's a great time. So,
Great.
Yeah. All right.
Time for the weekend review.
So this train's gonna keep going. This fun times.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, Zach. Lead us off.
This is the rare group weekend review. We all got together recently for a movie night with an old high school friend of ours, and we watched a couple of films. We watched Jerry Seinfeld's cinematic epic, The Bee Movie, and we watched the film that we'll be talking about this evening with you all, The Room, that great epic of bad moviedom. So it was an epic evening. I think I was the only one there who had already seen The Room, although that was years before, and I certainly got more than I expected out of it on this viewing. So what did you guys think of The Room?
I'm still not sure which room The Room is supposed to be.
The room is where the heart is. It's where we make relationship work. Anyway, you want to go get some ice cream? Also, how's your sex life?
Yeah, so I think the title is because originally he wrote this as a long, rambling novel, and then he turned it into a play. And I think the title is a relic of when it was a play, because I think when it was a play, it was all going to be set in the apartment living room. And that's why in the movie, whenever anything seems to happen, characters walk into the apartment living room for reasons that really make no sense in a movie, such as the two friends who go into the apartment to have sex in their friend's apartment, even though they presumably live in the same building. Like in a stage play, I think you'd kind of forgive something like that, because if the scene was relevant, at least, we need to see these characters on stage, and the set is the room. But in a movie, you could just take us to their apartment, which the film does not do.
I don't know if I should even attempt to critically assess this, but
basically, what, Christian, why don't you explain the plot? Walk us through what happens in the narrative of this film.
Why is this my job?
The challenge.
Okay. Oh my gosh, what's his name?
Johnny.
Okay, for Johnny.
They say his name like 50 times in the movie.
I know. I'm sorry. I just internalized Tommy Wiseau as like Judas, and that's all I had space for. Johnny. So Johnny is played by Tommy Wiseau, who also wrote, produced, and directed this. Is just like the best dude ever. Like he's just like the best. He's amazing. And there's this kid named Denny that lives in their apartment building, and he's just like taken Denny under his wing and like paid for his college tuition, and Denny's just there. So that's Denny. And but anyway, Johnny is dating Lisa, and he wants to get married to Lisa, but because Lisa is a woman, and women are cheating, untrustworthy creatures. This falls apart, and Lisa, spoiler alert, cheats on Johnny with his best friend, and then starts telling people that Johnny hit her when in fact he did not hit her.
He did not.
And scenes happen. Every scene in this film tends to happen like 3 to 4 times instead of once. You get the same conversation a billion times over. Sometimes characters will say one thing and immediately contradict themselves with the next sentence. And it is a miserably bad film. And if I'm taking it seriously, it's like probably a misogynistic and hateful film too. Yes. Not one you really want to watch unless you're in really good company and with other people that can enjoy how terrible it is. So
well said.
I think there's nothing that Christian said that was not true. However, I think I had a lot more fun. And I think the reason why I don't want to compare it to like something like Paul Blart, because that's like a different genre.
Yeah.
You know,
Paul Blart is
style. No, I don't.
At least.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you.
Okay, that's all you're allowed to say now. I don't trust anything else you're gonna say. Okay. Yes, I think it was fun because there's a character with a very strange accent, and I think that's funny. And I also think that the acting is bad, but in different ways. And I think you can tell that the actors came from different places with different, if any, lessons on how to act. And I think how repetitive some of the scenes are, and like how many mistakes that they can make in their performances that make it seem so painfully obvious that they are people in a room speaking words and not anything else. And I think having like the repeated messaging and that the seriousness, and I think Zach kind of mentioned this in a different way, but how intent that Tommy is in like telling this story and like how serious he is about it is what makes it so funny. And that I think it's not just like, oh, it's a terrible circumstance and it's like somebody's taking something and trying to make it, you know, they're trying to like make light of it or something, but this is actually like something he actually believes. You feel that with the direction. I can't believe I'm saying. You feel that
You're right,
through
though.
his direction, and you feel it through his own personal involvement with the writing and production and everything. And I think that is something. It's hard to say that it's admirable. I mean, I guess it is. I guess it is admirable to an extent, but I think that's what makes it fun to watch with other people. I think if you're really looking to critically analyze this, you are like beyond wasting your time. Reasonably, it's not even fair to do
apply a Marxist lens to the room.
yeah, apply a Marxist lens. Do not apply a feminist lens, you will lose.
No, yeah.
So
yeah, I think I'm gonna say something kind of audacious here, but you know, let me finish. I do think, kind of following on from what you have said, Mitchell, I think that Tommy Wiseau is an artist, and by extent, The Room is art. It's bad art, and he's a bad artist. But in The Room, I think he does what an artist is meant to do, and that he very much expresses himself through his work. Almost embarrassingly so, it is apparent that The Room is the anguished, strangely accented yell of a man in deep pain who earnestly believes that everyone has betrayed him. And this is him expressing that. I will agree that I think it should only be watched with a group, because I think that's the only way that it becomes fun. Like the last time I watched this, I watched it on my own. And if you just watch it on your own, it's just a slog, because like Christian said, everything happens like 3 times. it's like you could condense the content of this film down to like a 2-page pamphlet, and so little of it. It is almost fascinating to see somebody who clearly has no idea what a story is try to tell one, because people say the same things over and over again, and he's clearly thought, oh, well, some of these scenes feel a little samey, so why don't I throw in something new? So you'll have characters, like, admit that they have breast cancer, and then it never comes back, or becomes important, or informs anything in the future. You'll have bizarre scenes where something clearly happened earlier that a character is meant to address, but they really don't need to address it because there was no reason for it to happen in the first place, which is how you get, like, the me underwears scene where the guy, the friend, comes up to them in the alleyway and has this long, rambling recollection of a situation where he left his underwear in their apartment.
And then they play football.
And then they toss the football around in a 2x2x2 triangle. Yeah, I mean, even more so than The Room, I really recommend reading The Disaster Artist, the book, which Greg Sestero wrote about being in the room and being friends with Tommy Wiseau and, like, living with him. And reading about all of that, I think, really informs The Room, and it's not like it makes it make more sense, but it adds more background and expands the picture in a way that you can at least, like, wrap your head around. It also adds lots of stranger details, like apparently Tommy had to be talked out of an ending where Johnny would drive a BMW off of the roof of the apartment building and be revealed to be a vampire when it flew away into the horizon.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Apropos of nothing. But it does kind of add a lot more from the crew and cast perspective that makes you realize how, even if the final work is bad, everybody who had to work under the domineering hand of Tommy Wiseau was at least really trying to make a real movie. Yeah. The Room, 1 out of 5. I think we all disliked it, but also kind of enjoyed watching it, yeah. Okay. Is it time for me to go on the Marvelous Cinema Tour?
Yeah.
Okay. Where am I? Oh, yes.
Where am I?
I've fallen and I can't get up. Okay, so in a few weeks' time, I reviewed Thor: Love and Thunder. So now I'm talking about Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. So, okay. I will preface this by saying that if you've been watching us for the last season, you'll know I didn't really like the first Black Panther movie. It was a huge hit when I was when we were all in, I think, junior year of high school. But I really wasn't caught up in the wind, and eventually when I saw it on demand, I didn't really see what the big deal was. This film, during the marketing at least, was a lot more excited for. Because in the trailers, the color grading and cinematography looked a lot more impressive than the first one. It looked and felt like an actual movie. And like I mentioned last time, or like I mentioned in 3 weeks, the needle drops chosen for the trailer I thought were really effective and kind of got the people going. Now that I've actually watched the film, yes, it feels and looks more like an actual movie than the first Black Panther. I will insist on that. But I'm not going to say I was especially impressed. The first, 10 minutes or so, I was actually kind of excited and sort of in suspense, which was a new feeling for me. I haven't felt that in Phase 4 of the MCU. But there's that kind of cross-cut sequence where Angela Bassett is delivering an address to the UN, while I think a French military squad are breaking into a Wakandan lab, and the editing there is pretty good, and it feels like there's some actual consequences, and they they really emphasized the fact that T'Challa has died between films due to the tragic death of Chadwick Boseman, but it sort of felt like, wow, okay, it actually feels like there's some grit here, and there's some consequences, and T'Challa is actually just dead. I'm kind of impacted by that. And then all the Wakandan scientists like take out the military squad, and one of them makes a little joke about their spears, and I thought, oh no, we're back where we started.
Haven't you forgotten?
I don't think we're all the way back where we started. I do think this is better. This is like a 3 out of 5 compared to Black Panther's 2 out of 5. But again, I think the issue now is that everything in the MCU is subservient to the great cinematic universe. Not just the great cinematic universe, the great multimedia universe, because we got to set up shows on Disney Plus now, too. To the point that there's moments in this where I thought, oh, are they referencing this little thing to set up for later, but it's going to be subtle and it's not going to impact the whole narrative of the film? Specifically, I thought about that in regard to a character I can't remember the name of, but she's going to be essentially the next Iron Man type character. And
Riri Williams, Ironheart.
Ruby Williams?
Riri
Williams,
yes.
Okay. And when she was introduced, I thought, okay, she's kind of got the snappy dialogue going. She's clearly very intelligent. She designed this thing for the United States military, or maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. I think they talked about doing another, like, Iron Blank type film. Maybe it could be her. And then the film dismissed any ambiguity whatsoever and had her actually get in an Iron Man suit and fly around. And this thing that could have been like a cool little hint was turned into a, do you get it? She's gonna be the next Iron Man. And even, I mean, I think the ending battle in this, is it sort of over CGI'd and I think overscaled? Yes. But I was kind of involved in the conflict between Namor and Shuri?
Good job.
There we go.
Nice.
I was involved with that, and I thought, okay, great. He was defeated, and he went back to the ocean, and there was this conclusion, and then he's painting a cave painting and setting up for a later film, and I'm really tired of everything just being another domino. Nothing can ever just be conclusive. Nothing can ever be the end of anything, and it's really starting to wear down on me. Also, Martin Freeman did even less in this movie than he did in the first Black Panther, to the point that I genuinely do not feel he had to be in this film at all.
That's so depressing.
I think he's in it so that his interaction with Elaine can set up a S.H.I.E.L.D. show. For those who don't know, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in this film.
I keep forgetting.
Yeah, because
she's in this now.
I know that everybody has to be in the MCU now, but Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she really feels out of place in this. I think she's too comedic, like a personality, where anything she says and does in this movie feels like it's going to be followed by boom, 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 bow. I just it all feels like a gag to me. So I think she's a weird choice, and her and Martin Freeman, I think they're meant to have this weird competitive chemistry, but I don't think they do. Yeah, so it started promisingly and then tanked itself as it went along. What is next for me? I think maybe
Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, maybe?
Yes, Quantumania.
Wow, we're almost... Is that it?
The end is in sight. Wow. So last week I will have reviewed Quantumania. So you already know my thoughts on it at this point. But yeah, this is one that I actually had some friends go to see this in the cinema, and I almost went with them, and then I had homework. And after they got back,
homework.
After they got back, I thought, yeah, I think it's a good thing I didn't go to see that. Because, they were like unanimously like, yeah, it was bad. And I think Quantumania is kind of based on the consensus I've heard, Quantumania is sort of the turning point where even people who were like very into these films beforehand were like, yeah, that one wasn't very good. What's going on here? So tune in next time if you want to hear my thoughts on a film that nobody seems to like. But yeah, in the meantime, 3 out of 5 for Wakanda Forever.
Cool.
So that means that after Guardians 3, we have to wait until November.
Oh no, I'm done after Guardians 3. I'm
Yeah.
tapping out after
Yeah.
Guardians.
Waiting until
no.
the Marvel, Zach.
No,
We're gonna review the Marvel, Zach.
no. We are releasing Zach from his indentured servitude after Guardians 3. That is only fair. We've put him through enough.
There might be a bit of a
agree.
break though between Quantumania and me talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. That is until our episode 93 comes out. Maybe it will be on physical and streaming by then, but I don't think it comes out on streaming and physical until like early August. So there might be a couple weeks that I take off until I can get a hold of a copy of the film, because I'm sorry guys, I heard it was good, but I'm not buying a belated ticket to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in cinemas
That's fine.
like 2 months after it came out.
Yeah.
Fine. What's now what?
Rundown.
Rundown.
Gotta escape.
Try to escape. Try to escape.
Digging.
Minute for Christian to run down as fast as possible before the Germans capture him, just so he can escape again
I got this.
in a different tunnel. Zach can start
Okay.
off and time us.
In 3, 2, 1, start.
Theme song.
2 out of 5. No, 3 out of 5. No, 4 out of 5.
Duty of officer to escape.
3 out of 5.
99% being ill-mannered.
3 out of 5.
Rotten eggs in one basket.
3 out of 5.
Baseball.
3 out of 5.
Zakula.
4 out of 5.
Bike riding, paying tuition.
4 out of 5.
Tea without milk being uncivilized.
3 out of 5.
Nellis Warbler.
3 out of 5.
Focal plane shutter.
3 out of 5.
Potato moonshine.
2 out of 5.
Khaki pants at night.
4 out of 5.
Tally-ho.
3 out of 5.
McQueen motorcycle stunts.
4 out of 5.
Resistance drive-by.
2 out of 5.
Good luck.
3 out of 5.
Okay.
That was it.
We had a
just
concise
Oh,
one this
phew.
week.
I
But
was worried because I really bungled the beginning there. Oh.
that was only 3 seconds spare, though.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, this has been episode 91.
Mhm.
And who is for number 92?
Yes.
That will be me. And let me flip the page in my Cookie Pocket diary. Ah, yes. Next time, we'll be bringing one of my favorite directors onto the show. Unfortunately, we'll be bringing maybe his worst movie onto the show, too. Because next time, we're going to be talking about David Lynch's Dune from 1984. Widely regarded by everyone, including him, as his worst motion picture. But, you know, the nation has been struck by Dune fever over the past few years. I think we all 3 saw the Villeneuve adaptation of Dune. So I'm curious to see what you guys think of this one, which is definitely radically different from that one. So tune in next time if you want to listen to us talk about Dune from 1984.
Otherwise, we'll keep fighting the cause against the German war machine 13 episodes of World War II films later.
Right on.
With that, I will play the theme song of Great Escape. I don't have it on hand, but we'll just,
okay.
all
We're not
play it in
getting
our heads.
DMCA'd up in here.
All right, that's it. That's it, Zach. No.
Oh,
Copyright. Copyright. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.